Morning, everyone. Welcome to our session on planning safer meetings and events after COVID-19. And we're going to be looking at what venues and event organisers can do to help make meetings safer for everyone once the government allows them to continue. Joining me today is Christina, who is the Venue Sales and Operations Manager at 58VE. And we've got Natalie Shattock, who is Senior Events Manager at EMEA at Morningstar. So we've only got 20 minutes, so we're going to jump straight in with the questions. First question, Natalie, what exactly does a safer event look like?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here with you. Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, really. And I think the honest answer is nobody really knows yet. We know it's going to involve a lot less interaction, but it doesn't mean it can't be a fun and engaging environment for events. And I think, you know, some of the previous panelists have mentioned about making sure that we're showing that what we're offering for live events is that you can't get at a digital experience. And I think one of the things to think about is this is constantly evolving, and whilst we've got a fairly clear idea about what we're going to need to do now, there's going to be new guidance issued as the science develops. There's going to be new technologies that come to the fore, so keeping up to date with that's going to be really important. And I don't think it's like one single silver bullet. There's going to be a whole raft of different measures that we're going to have to employ. And it's an all or nothing approach, because the less you do, the more you undermine the stuff that you are doing. So I think one thing to bear in mind, it's not just about the things that are visible to delegates. Yes, you really want to make sure that you're doing things like socially distancing your chairs in conference halls and handling your food and beverage delivery differently. But all that gets undermined if you then aren't delivering on those things behind the scenes as well. So, you know, making sure that you aren't just having social distancing with staff out in the foyer where people can see you, but also behind closed doors. And I think, you know, Jake and Lauren have mentioned the link to the Safer Events framework that HiSpace have laid out. I really recommend you go and take a look at that, because they have thought of a whole gamut of different things. And one of the things that they've really focused on as well is, you know, the idea of staff training at your venues. Are the venues offering paid sick leave, which I think is going to be absolutely crucial to make sure that this entire framework is as robust as possible. And one thing I wanted to echo that lots of the other panelists have said, and I know Christina agrees with me on this, is really treating if you're an event manager, treating your venue as a partner and making sure that you're having really, really honest, open, transparent conversations from the get-go, making sure that you're identifying, you know, what it is that you are expecting, what it is that the venue can offer, who has responsibility for each different element. Because at the end of the day, you are in a partnership together, and if something does go wrong, it's a shared liability. So you need to be working with partners that you trust to make sure that we can deliver the framework that's going to ensure these events remain as safe as they can be. But, you know, the accreditation program that HiSpace are talking about, there's lots of different areas that they cover, from PPE through to sterilisation and health screening. So I would really recommend everyone take a look through that and see if there are things that they need to implement themselves.
And for a venue perspective, Christina, what do you think safer events are going to look like from your angle?
Morning, everybody. I think it's one of those things we keep saying about the new normal. And I think naturally humans are very adaptive, and I think we're just adapting to things already. So we're looking at what people are doing. You know, when you go shopping or you're in the supermarket, you're at that social distance. And I think a safe event is going to have all of those measures that Natalie's already mentioned that are covered in the HiSpace guidelines. You know, we are going to be socially distant. There's going to be increased cleanliness. We're going to be looking at doing temperature checks, and those things are just going to become the norm. And I think they're quite nice things to have as a delegate, as an attendee. It's going to make you feel safer, as well as those of us at the venues and the event organisers that are delivering them, really.
Awesome. So, Natalie, what should event organisers be planning for at the moment? Should they be planning events at all? When should they be planning them? Just what really should be the focus right now?
Yeah, so we're operating on a similar basis to Sarah on the previous panel. We've got plans to do live events mid-November, much more scaled back than perhaps we were anticipating before this happened, and then into Q1 of next year as well. And I think there's lots of different measures that people can employ, and I think from an event manager perspective, things like, you know, getting health declarations prior to the event, you know, keeping a registry of all the attendees that have come to your event, so that if, you know, something does go wrong, someone is found to be infected later on, you've got a means to support contact tracing. We've also talked before about contractual elements. So, you know, looking at your force majeure, we thought our force majeure was pretty robust on lots of venues, and we found it perhaps it wasn't as robust as it should have been. So that's been a little bit of a wake-up call for us. I think considering, you know, if you're trying to bring sponsors on board for your event, how can you comfort them? So looking at things like, you know, we've had sponsors who have said to us, well, we're happy to sponsor it, but at the moment we're not permitted to attend these events ourselves. And if the government open the doors and say, yes, we can, but our firm says still, no, we cannot sponsor, where does that leave us from, you know, from a refund perspective? So considering things like that. And I think the communications aspect is going to be absolutely crucial. I mean, obviously we've already talked about communicating with your venue and being really open with them, but also your delegates proactively in advance, making sure that if they're thinking about registering for an event, what measures are you doing to ensure it's safe throughout that whole life cycle of the event up until the day? Are you being really open and honest about your refund policies? And I think really crucially, well, not just what measures you've put in place for their safety at the event, but also what are you expecting of them? What is it you're asking them to do in terms of social distancing at the event, making sure that's really, really clear. And it's probably something you want to consider bringing into your terms and conditions to make sure that delegates are signing off on the fact that they're prepared to adhere to your measures, because if they flout those on the day, you're going to need to be able to address that. The best way to have that is with the terms and conditions backing that up. And another thing to consider, is there anything you can do to arm individuals? So if you've got an individual who wants to attend an event and at the moment their company's saying they're not sure about it, can you give anything to that individual that they can take to their organisation to persuade them that this business that you work with is planning to make the event as low risk as possible? And I think the accreditation way is a great way to do that. Yeah, I think those are the kind of things that come to mind at the moment.
Yeah, especially what you say about with the delegates need to abide by everything as well, because you can be as planned as you want, but then there's always the human element that you've got to take into account as well. Christina, what can venues do at the moment? What measures can you put in place now to be prepared for when things do open up again?
I think planning is key, to be honest. I think we've got this time at the moment, we're not actually physically, or a lot of us aren't physically in the venues. We're, you know, all at home, working collaboratively together. So it's just that scenario planning. It's looking at your floor plans, it's assessing your capacities, it's working out, can you set up a one-way route throughout the venue? What do you need to be doing to increasing your hygiene? What kind of contactless registration can you offer, but still keeping in line with security measures? I think it's really important to be working. You know, you may just be sales or just be operations, but you need to all be working together along with your building management team, how your catering is delivered. There's an awful lot to think about, and I think it's nice to use this opportunity to have some time to go through all of that. You know, now's the time to set up those working groups, do some best case scenario, worst case scenario, and just have a, you know, think about how you can dial it up and dial it down. I think it's best to have, you know, at the absolute strictest, it's this, but as things can ease, what can we lay off? What can we, you know, as we kind of continue through this and hopefully things get better. And it's just doing, you know, that research, it's keeping up to date with what's going on. I think we're quite fortunate that we can look internationally. So to have a look at what Europe's doing, how venues, conference centres across Europe are reopening. Name it in America, you know, there's the Event Safety Alliance that are really useful, that have also put out some guidelines. So it's just keeping up to date with everything. It's keeping each other informed. Everyone's going to have different networks. It's a case of really looking to your networks. You know, my venue is independent, we're charity owned. So we don't have that kind of larger corporation that's across the country, but we've got those networks with other venues that are nearby us that are doing the exact same thing. You know, we're all in the same position. And it's just about working together, talking to your clients, talking to event organisers, finding out what they are really worried about. You know, your event organiser is going to know their audience best. And it's a case of getting a sense of, you know, what are their audience, their delegates, their clients worried about, and just bringing it all together really, and just doing as much as you can to keep yourself informed. It's not going to be handed to us on a plate. It's not going to be a one size fits all. So it's just about getting that information, working together, and just doing the best that you can. You know, we want to reopen. We want to be working closely with our event organisers. We want to be offering a great event to our attendees, and it's just doing as much as you can now that we have the time to do it. To plan really.
And also, look, safety is obviously the most important thing, but that events also need to be engaging and fun enough that people want to attend them. I was just wondering, do you reckon that we're going to be able to kind of balance that safety and kind of the value that people get from events anyway? Christina, if you want to go first on that one.
Yeah, of course. I think as a venue, you know, we have to be creative, and I think a lot of people in the events industry are natural creators anyway. They want to have that kind of high delegate client engagement. So it's just thinking about, you know, is there anything that we can do in the queuing systems? Is there anything that we can do to make it a little bit more fun? Although we are going to be at a social distance, we're there for that person-to-person people interaction, which is what we're all really missing at the moment. So it's thinking about what's appropriate for the event, what's appropriate for the space, and just how we can make it as interactive as possible. I'm sure Natalie will have loads of ideas as well that will be more event specific.
Yeah, I'd really echo what Christina said there. I think, you know, one of the biggest positives and reasons we do events is for that interaction. And obviously that's the biggest thing that we can't really properly do right now. So it's working out ways that you can still facilitate that interaction, albeit, you know, spaced away from each other. So trying to come up with mechanisms like that, you know, whether it's like a speed dating scenario, so you're setting up meetings with people, but it's all socially distanced. You know, there's lots of ways that we can look at our events as they previously existed and try and implement those sorts of things. You know, you can probably integrate things like gamification as well to try and make it a bit more fun and a bit more engaging. But I think these are things that, you know, we're all going to have to think long and hard about and go back to the drawing board on, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's you know, we can look at it as a positive, as a way to reframe the way that we're approaching events and the experiences that we're offering our attendees.
So we're going to go over to audience questions now. Thank you for sending all those in. Keep them coming. The first one, we've got, obviously the buzzword at the moment is hybrid events. Everyone's talking about how an event can be both virtual and physical at the same time. Is this something that you're considering for your events, Natalie, and how can you foresee that working?
Yeah, we're definitely considering that, certainly for our larger events. You know, partly capacity, we're not going to be able to have as many people there, partly because some people will still be reticent to attend. There's going to be a whole load of people that we won't be able to get in front of, and so we want to, you know, make the most of that content and make sure it's available to those that weren't able or willing to attend. I think, you know, we are fairly advanced with that. We have been foraying into that already, so we're pretty sure on our plans with that, and we've got tech providers that we're working with already on that, but that won't be the case for everybody. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps venues could help with in the short term, is almost having like a hybrid tech package bolt-on, like to assist people, at least, you know, helping event managers that perhaps aren't so familiar with the technology required, and just offering up some guidance on that. You know, that's something that would fall under the responsibility of, as the events manager to pay for, obviously, but if you can give guidance as a venue, that would really help, I think.
Christina, what are you planning to do towards hybrid events? So do you reckon you're able to accommodate them? How easy do you think it would be to get that sorted?
Yeah, definitely. So in line with what Natalie said, it's something that we do already. We're fortunate at 58V, we're a purpose-built venue. And when we were thinking about what we want to have included in there, we have got a really high spec of AV, so we can do streaming already from the room. We've got that inbuilt, and it's something that we include in our room hire fees anyway. We very much had the mentality of, realistically, for the size of the room that we've got, you're going to need quite a lot of AV anyway. And it's nice to be, you know, have an AV technician that's always on site and included within you to help with that, because it is, you know, it is something new to think about. I'd be a bit cautious about the tech, so it's important to kind of have that sort of helping hand along the way. But there's loads of platforms out there, and I think the one thing this lockdown has shown, how many different ways there are of doing things. I think we're all getting quite good at it and quite used to it now, and it's something that audiences are going to expect to see, especially because you can reach people that aren't, you know, in the near vicinity, or may not want to travel, may not be able to travel. So there's an awful lot that we can do, and I think with venues, you just have to be as accommodating as possible. I think it's going to be an expectation now, as much as many other things already are. It's going, you know, it's going to be more unusual if you don't have it, really. So it's just a case of, again, using this time to do a lot of research, once you're back on site, to do a lot of testing. I think something that's also going to be quite important to think about is, you know, with using microphones, PA systems, having your AV technician to make sure they're working securely, that they're nice and safe as well, that microphones are being swapped and disinfected in between people, or they're using covering as well. So it's just thinking through all the eventualities and all the different options that there are.
You mentioned travelling to the event itself, because that's something that some people have brought up. Because you can put all the measures that you want inside the venue, but then what can you do in terms of organising an event, in terms of the venue accessibility itself, to minimise the risks to people whilst they're travelling there? Natalie, do you want to?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we can learn a lot from businesses that are looking at their back to work, back to the office strategies as well. So things like staggering start times, maybe starting your events a bit later, so not having everything starting at 8:30, 9 o'clock, because that's going to be peak traffic time. Considering, you know, the venues that you choose as well. What are the transport links like there? You know, is it easy to drive to, park? Those sorts of things are going to have to be considered for sure.
Awesome. And another thing that's coming up as well is the fact that we're all going to need to be working together on this a bit more, and perhaps that it's not just enough for just the venue to do a risk assessment or just the event organizer to do a risk assessment. How do you reckon that you're going to be able to collaborate together to kind of carry out 2 risk assessments on both ends? Natalie, sorry.
Yeah, I saw the question. It was whether there should be joint risk assessments, and I think that is definitely the way forward. You know, back to what we were saying earlier about collaborating together. You're in it together. You've got a shared risk, a shared liability. So actually being able to come together and identify who's responsible for what, and make sure that that's stuck to, then I think that's going to be really, really important. Just for your peace of mind as an event manager or as a venue, to make sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction and doing their bit to make sure that you're still hosting a safe event.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the key word Natalie mentioned right at the beginning of the session was partnerships. And I think the way that I know my venue like to work, and a lot of people I know in other venues like to work, it is a collaboration. You are working together to deliver their event. And I think that's more important now than ever. You know, your delegates, they don't see a differentiation between where they've invited to and what they're doing. It's not 2 different sides for them. So I think as we move forward, it is a case of working really closely with them. There's stuff that as a venue, you're going to know really, really well. There's stuff as an event organizer, they're going to know really well. And it's just a case of putting those skills together, working really closely, having that complete understanding of every part of it. I think we've also mentioned that communication is going to be super key. And so it's important that, you know, delegates are warned in advance of stuff. We need to be getting those messages through that we might not be able to without the event organisers' help. So every part of it now, I think, is going to be a case of working even stronger and delivering this event in partnership.
Yeah, people asking about catering and sustainability, because obviously there's a big talk about like having to have everything in a plastic lunchbox, you know, so at the end of the day. And obviously sustainability is still a really important thing that a lot of corporations consider when going to venues. So Christina, how do you foresee kind of catering around safe events turning out in the future?
I think it's a really difficult one, to be honest, and it's kind of one of the bigger challenges that we've got. Sustainability has been growing in importance, which is such a good thing. It is so important, and I think nobody wants us to see us go backwards, especially now, you know, we can all see how the climate and the environment is doing better with us all being in lockdown. We don't want to go back to producing more single-use plastics or not being able to recycle things. But unfortunately, you know, the nature of buffets being off the table, reducing touch points, there is that need to have things kind of wrapped and covered. So I think it is a chance to get really creative. It's something that we're going to have to do a lot of thinking about. I think those conversations are definitely already starting, and we've not found the solution yet, but sharing that knowledge when people have got ideas is going to be really important. Like I said, working together, working with different catering teams. It's one of our biggest hurdles, and I think in the next few weeks we're going to have moved on a lot more to where we are now. So I don't know at the moment, but we're all going to keep learning, and it's definitely high on the agenda. I think we don't want to go backwards in terms of sustainability at all.
That's all we've got time for this session today. Thank you so much to Natalie and Christina for talking to us. And yeah, that's it for us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next session.